Okay, the spaghetti sauce has been simmering for over 9 hours and it is ready to be canned. It tastes absolutely delicious as the various flavors have blended together over the last couple hours. The tomato sauce reduced from about 15 quarts to about 12 and a half, and then together with all the onions and mushrooms and Swiss chard and other ingredients, it is back to about 15 quarts in size in this pot. That means that I'll be filling at least 15 quart jars and using my 2 water bath canners, which each hold about 7 quarts. Now that's 14, so that gives me another quart for dinner tonight. Now first let me go over with you the tools for this simple operation. First of all, the water bath canner with its lids and with the rack. We desperately need this rack on the bottom. Otherwise, if the jars touch the bottom of the pot, they will break and it'll ruin the whole process. So let me put this into this water bath canner. Now another tool is the jar grabber. This obviously can safely hold a boiling hot mason jar so that you don't burn your hands when either placing the jar into the pot or when removing them. Now another tool is the funnel to help you get your sauce into the jar without making a mess. And if you look carefully, in the inside of the bottom rim, the bottom of the funnel, you'll find a protruding mark or a line to indicate that up to that line means that you have a full jar. If you don't want to overfill, and you do not want to overfill, then you will abide by that line, and that will then give you enough air on the top of the jar to create a vacuum that will pull the lid down shut and create a strong seal. And also, if you have too much in the jar, it leaks out and it creates a mess in your pot. It can even blow the jar apart. I always allow about a ½ inch of air on the top of the quart jar. Now another tool is the ladle. You need this, of course, to transport the sauce from the cooking pot into the jar. And another important tool is the kitchen tongs. I use them instead of a magnetized lid grabber in order to hold on to the lids and rings as I sterilize them in boiling water. I should share here that I sterilize everything right before canning. The jars, the lids, the rings, the funnel, the ladle, anything that comes in contact with the sauce right before the canning process. I have already at this point boiled everything for about 3 minutes except for the lids, which I do right before I put them on the filled jars. So you might ask at this point, why do I go to all these lengths? And the reason is botulism. I want to sleep well at night, knowing that I've taken all the precautions I can to prevent such a catastrophe, because I give a lot of the jars of my spaghetti away, as well as my fruit preserves, to friends. And I want to keep all my friends as friends. Now another tool that home canners use, but I don't, is a spacer. It's usually made of plastic. You put it on the top of the jar, part of it protrudes down into the jar. It can easily measure the air gap or head space above the sauce in your jar. I don't need it because I follow the guideline that's at the bottom of the funnel. Now another tool that is very necessary in canning is a clock or your watch, because you need to have your quart jars covered in boiling water, called a rolling boil, in the canning pot for at least 50 minutes. I usually go 55. That time period works just fine for our altitude here in Midland, Texas. For other places with a different altitude, please check with the website I've mentioned before, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, as they have charts and graphs telling the correct boiling time for your particular altitude. Now, I try to keep about an inch of water above the jars, but it won't hurt if you have a little bit less. When you do pint-sized jars, the time period is 10 minutes less for boiling. If you have quarts and pints in the same pot, always go the time period for the larger jar. Now, I should say something about jars. The two main brands that are available and best, I believe, are Kerr and Ball. And they also seem to make the best lids and rims. I always buy new lids for canning, but I will reuse rims until they get good and rusty. Most other jars are made in China, and they do not hold up very well, especially in pressure canning, which we're not doing today. Pressure cooker canning is for low non-acid food, like meats and beans, but fortunately, tomato sauce, my tomato sauce, is nicely acidic, as well as my pear butter and preserves, which I can easily do in water bath canners on my stove. Okay, let me show you how simple it is to can by demonstrating a couple times using the tools of the trade. The jars, rims, and tools have already been sterilized. So let's ladle up. So I take my ladle. Let me even sterilize it a bit again before I use it. It usually takes 4 ladlefuls to fill a mason jar. Okay, that's right where it should be. Then I take my grabber, my tongs, and I will then sterilize the lid in the boiling water before I put it on the top of the jar. And then I will take a rim and carefully put it on the jar. And now this is really important. I don't want to strongly, tightly seal the lid. I want to keep my fingers extended, not like this, but like this, and tighten with fingers extended. If you tighten real hard and you're pretty strong, you're going to get too tight a seal on that, and that can easily explode the jar or prevent the jar from allowing gas to escape, so that when it starts to cool, it creates the correct vacuum to pull the lid down and create a good seal. So let me do this one more time and show you. We ladle up. For me, it's 4 ladles approximately of my sauce in the jar. It's a little too much. Sterilize the spoon before I do this. I'll take out the larger amount. I'll grab the tongs again and don't want to use two lids at once. I made that mistake one time. Sterilize the lid. Grab a rim. Finger tighten. It's as simple as that. And in 50 minutes, they will be ready to remove.